Welcome to the Lost Vet podcast, where we are helping you to get back to your passion and purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Melodie Chan, and in this episode of Destination People, we're going to talk about what it takes to be a great mentor, but also what it takes to be a great mentee. Have a listen. Rob, in one of the previous episodes, you did a really great job of defining the difference between the training, mentoring, and coaching phases of developing a person in a new role. And I thought we would maybe circle back to the mentoring part, because you mentioned in that conversation that mentoring is often the hardest part in that journey. And so I thought we would just dive into that a little more. Maybe let's get into why that mentoring phase in particular is so challenging.
Yeah, I don't think we appreciate what an important part of the process mentoring is. And I think then sometimes what we do is the opposite of that. We over-index and we think mentoring is the main solution. There's a lot of, I think we said in the last topic or the last pod when we discussed this, it's almost being viewed as mentoring is like a hot topic at the moment and about how important it is. But again, you've got to understand it as part of the learning journey rather than just as this kind of catch-all tool. I think in business, we're always looking for this perfect solution to problems, right? If we just do some mentoring, then we're going to solve the problem. And of course, it's more than that. And I think that's why many mentoring programs are pretty ineffective. So the reason why mentoring is so difficult, or why it's needed at such a difficult time, perhaps is another way to think about it, is that if you think about the four stages of learning, the four ways we develop a competence or a skill, we start out at unconscious incompetence, and that's really where training is usually found. It's where training is most useful, where we're introducing knowledge. We're saying, here is some information that you don't previously have, and let's try and do some exercises and different ways we can work to help you consolidate that knowledge in your mind. Mentoring then is the bit when you actually start to do, if you like. So it's kind of like, if you think about the unconscious incompetence bit, you don't really know how good or bad you are at something. Then you go back into work, you go back into the real world, and now you're kind of going, right, I'm going to try out these new skills that I've learned about, or these skills that I heard about yesterday. And then we meet the second phase of that learning, which is conscious incompetence. We become conscious of our incompetence. And that's a pretty big brick wall to hit, right? When you don't know how to do something, you hear about it, you're excited, maybe motivated, you want to make that change. And then we go and do it, and then you realize you kind of suck at it. That is a massive demotivator, because what we'd like to do is we'd like to feel like we could just go straight in and master something and almost shortcut the process where mentoring is so important. So that moment of where your knowledge meets the skill implementation, that's a massive zone of like giving up, right? So and you can think of so many different examples for that. Like, I used to be a heavy smoker, and you decide to stop smoking, you're enthusiastic about stopping smoking, you tell people you're going to stop smoking, then you try to learn this new behavior, you start to, a couple of days go by, then you hit that conscious incompetence wall. You're like, oh my God, this is really hard to not do the thing I used to do all the time every day. And that's where people quit. That's where people give up, when the rubber meets the road, when the skills and the knowledge have to meet together in implementation. So that is why mentoring is absolutely critical, because you need that person to kind of connect themselves to you, or actually we'll talk about it a bit more, multiple people to connect themselves to you and you to them, to secure that learning journey forward, so that you, even if things are hard or difficult, that you don't feel like you should give up. I just read a great book by Adam Grant, who I always enjoy his books, and he talks about building scaffolding around it. I mean, he's not necessarily using the particular phases I'm talking about, but I really like this idea of scaffolding around the learner, like putting a support system, a structure, people around that person. And that person, of course, is the mentor and mentors to help them. So mentoring is this really critical skill at a very difficult time, because we're transitioning from no knowledge to being amazing at something. And that bit in the middle is when we need a huge amount of support. So even if we stick at something, the next phase we hit in that learning journey is conscious competence. So like we can do something, but we have to do it consciously, i.e., we have to think about the thing that we're doing because we need to concentrate on it. It hasn't become intuitive. And again, this is another big risk area. It's another area where people give up a lot because, and it's not for the same reasons that earlier phase. Like we've got stuck into it. Maybe we're, as I say, we're competent. We can think about it. We can do it. But it tends to be more like a situational give up. So a big event will happen. So we've used the analogy of driving a car in a previous episode. So let's use that one again. You're driving. You've done okay. You're with your instructor. You're now driving around town confidently. You're on the freeways. You're on the motorways. You're on wherever you are. But then you're going to a roundabout, and then someone nearly like smashes into the side of you. There's this big, terrifying, scary event. And because you don't have that intuitive confidence to know I can bounce back from this, you're having to still concentrate on the process of driving. A lot of people give up at that point. There's a bit like a big event. Oh my God, I thought I could do it, but I couldn't. I was in that situation, and then I realized I was completely out of my depth. So that conscious competence is a big high risk area. And I think sometimes in operations, in organizations, we don't recognize that. And we kind of think, oh yeah, I can see them doing it now. They're fine. And it's like, no, they're not fine. Until they can do it intuitively, then they still are in that mentoring phase. So the mentor has a really critical role to play in that transition, because we are the most exposed we'll ever be during those two midsections of that learning journey. We are exposed in a new environment, a new situation, a new skill. We're exposed to scrutiny by our peers and our colleagues. So I think it's fantastic that mentoring is becoming such a useful, it's becoming accepted as such a useful tool. It's not the only tool. It's still 20% of the journey, but it's critical 20%. So the job of a mentor during that particular phase, or mentors, is essential, because what you're doing is you're propping the person up from point A to point C. You're that bit in the middle, point B, where they can move forward confidently.
Yeah, I think I often hear the term mentoring, as you said. It's used quite a bit, and I've heard it quite a bit in the last 20 years, even in veterinary medicine. And I often think now, as I've better understood the terms training, mentoring, and coaching, that when we talked about mentoring, I think we were actually confusing it with the training bit and not actually moving into that mentoring phase.
Yeah.
I really like this idea of thinking about mentoring as this time when you actually have a village around you, that scaffolding, if you will, the community to prop you up. What, in your opinion, are some of those qualities then that are needed from the mentor or mentors during this time to support that individual? What, I guess maybe a more specific question is, how does this differ from a coach if you're a mentor in that space?
That's a great question, and it's a much more collaborative process. So mention, and you're right to draw that confusion, or to mention that confusion between training and mentoring, because it's almost like we treat it as a continuation, or it's a cliff edge. So the training is like a cliff. I call it cliff edge training all the time, where you do it and then you fall off back into work. And mentoring is like the rope bridge to get you to the other side of the canyon, if you think about it that way. So the key to it is that it's very, very collaborative from a knowledge perspective, whereas training is very much a transfer of information, right? So the trainer knows more about the trainee, and they pass on their specific information to the other person, if you think about it in a single topic sense. Whereas mentoring, the hallmarks of a great mentor are someone that's very inclusive, someone that's very interested in the opinion of the person that they're mentoring, someone that's really engaged and open, someone that's got obviously some experience, some knowledge in the area that mentoring is happening, but also recognizing where their mentorship stops too. I think sometimes we think of a mentor as like, we talked about this in the session yesterday, but mentors, they're not designed to be unicorns. They're not magical creatures that should be able to mentor in every situation. So mentors should have a specific value offering to that process, right? So mentors sometimes, when it's mentoring, sometimes not mentors, mentoring sometimes when it's been done poorly, I feel, don't know where they should stop doing it, because it's a skills related thing still, which is why I think it gets confused with training. So it gets treated more like a one directional thing. But it's not that you can't know the same amount about everything, right? You can't be a magical mentor that has all the skills and knowledge. So when I've mentioned in our chat so far, mentor or mentors, what I really mean is that, to use your term, it does take a village. You need different mentors with different experience to help you with different things. It's I believe a mistake to think that a mentor is going to be able to help you across a broad cross section of issues and challenges that you're facing. I I passionately believe it's much more likely that you'll have a mentor for strategy, a mentor for medicine, a mentor for people skills, a mentor for your finances, your accounts, a mentor for your health and fitness. That makes a heck of a lot more sense to me than this kind of unicorn mentor, which is suddenly knows everything about everything. And I think even if you think about that conceptually, if the mentor feels like they have to or do know everything, that's going to skew that relationship into one directional. And mentoring is not one directional, it's collaborative. It's two people working together on the confidence and competence of the mentee. That is the critical stuff. Feeling good about doing something and doing good about something. So like feeling and doing both in a positive way. And that can only be achieved when it's collaborative. It can't be achieved if someone's just telling you what to do or telling you war stories or giving you advice about, well, when I was a lad, I used to do this. I mean, that's not mentoring. It's a part of mentoring, but it's not the whole package. And like anything, if it's not done well, it's not done well. So it sometimes can be quite disempowering, because what you're really highlighting is the skills gap between the mentor and the mentee. So you're putting a lot of pressure on the mentee to recognize that there's a journey to go and it's going to be okay. And sometimes that's not the encouragement they need when they're thinking about giving up on the thing because it's hard. What they need to recognize is they've got value in this process too. Their ideas count. Their suggestions, although maybe different to the mentors, also should be explored. But with the support network of that person that's been there before, and there's a dual learning going on at the same time. I've heard lots of great mentors say it's such a good learning process too. Like I learn by being a mentor just as much as the mentee is learning as well. You also ask kind of like, well, how does that differ from coaching? So I'm kind of saying mentoring can be deployed in a very skills or knowledge specific kind of way. Coaching, and this is what I like about coaching, is that you don't need to know anything about the subject, right? So a coach doesn't need to know anything to be a great coach. In fact, sometimes the lack of knowledge about something allows for even better coaching, because you're not tied to the problem, as we've talked about before. So mentors can and should get involved in the problem. It's like workshopping, figuring things out, working it out together, but in a narrow sense on the skill that they have. Whereas coaches, they can ask questions about anything because they don't need to have the knowledge. In fact, the person that's being coached frequently knows a heck of a lot more about the subject, if not 100% more about the subject than the coach does. Like I've so many clients, they just run rings around me in the brains department, but I don't need to know what they know. I just need to know what questions to ask.
I think what this really makes me think about then is, as a person who's managing another person, or where you've got somebody reporting to you, this really then helps to relieve that burden that we might have in our head that we do need to know it all, in the sense that you can actually be a coach to that person, but maybe the area you're helping them to develop in, they're in that mentoring phase. And this idea then that you actually are engaging other people who know more than you in that subject area to be mentoring the person on your team. It doesn't have to be you. So that now alleviates another sort of pressure, if you will, that you might be thinking, oh, I don't know how I'm going to train and mentor this person. And maybe this also allows that person that's on your team to come back to you, and you can ask, what have you been learning, or how is the journey, which then also helps
Mm.
the mentee synthesize the learning process, because they've got to either talk about it or show, and that then becomes part of that whole process, which then leads me to my next question. As a mentee, what are some of these, again, because it's a two-way street, to be collaborative in this particular challenging phase, if you will? What are some of the qualities, in your opinion, that make up a good mentee?
Well, I mean, we've talked, I know, on and off our podcast about listening and hearing, but I think that's a critical element to it, where you need to have an open attitude. I think it was Carol Dweck wrote that very famous book, Mindset, and it's a growth mindset, I suppose, is the simple way to put it, which is looking at things from the long-term benefit of investing in your development, rather than looking at the short-term issues that are based around a problem. So I think when we get task focused with mentoring, that we can sometimes lose sight of the bigger picture, that even if something's bad or difficult, in the big picture, it's actually great because we're learning about something that's going to be useful for us. And I think when I meet different, I mean, I had a situation a couple of weeks ago, which I found really, like when it happened, it just like hit me like a ton of bricks. And then I've gotten a lot better over the years of within a day kind of going, this is happening for a reason. How am I using this situation? And I think that's the way I would encourage mentees to approach their mentorship program with whoever it is, or the people, whoever they are, that this is whether it's good or bad, it's happening for you. It's all a great opportunity to develop. I think also you need to be kind to yourself. I think you often hear a lot of negative self-talk with people that are going through a mentorship process because of imposter syndrome, because of lack of confidence, because of a lack of experience, lack of knowledge in that particular area. And really, I would encourage you to engage in this idea that you'll never be finished. Like you're an imperfect thing by nature, and you're going to spend the rest of your life learning lots of new things. And even at the end of your life, when you've spent your whole life learning, you will still know only a fraction of the things that can be learned. So this process of mentoring is just this incredibly useful, empowering opportunity for you to learn and engage and to leverage the skills and knowledges of the other person or people. And the other thing I would suggest as a good attitude to have from a mentee perspective is recognizing that this is an accelerant. So even though sometimes it can feel like we're slowing down, I did the training, I just need to get on with it. Actually, what mentoring will do is it will accelerate you to your destination. It's like being put into a flywheel where you go into this process with training, and then it like spins you out at a greater velocity into where you can just accept coaching as the support you need. So with that, it's about doubling down on it. So from a mentee perspective, make time available, like make regular, consistent time available, because we're in this kind of repetition phase, right, where we're trying to develop that competency ourselves with the support. So mentoring and being a mentee, it's not about, yeah, let's meet once a month. I don't get that. That's not how mentoring works. Mentoring is like, okay, you got some new knowledge. Let's repeat. Let's get you out of the flywheel into your potential future with this skill so we can pick up the next thing at the training phase. I don't understand just mentoring on a cadence of like once a month. I just don't understand it. I get why people think that's the right thing to do, but that's only useful if you're combining, and we can talk about this on another call perhaps, but if you're combining training, mentoring, coaching all at the same time. And that's something that I've learned to do over the years, that I don't just sit in one silo or another, because all the different competencies at different things are all going on at the same time. So even in a 30-minute call with someone, you could be like, someone could be at a training phase with one thing, mentoring phase with another thing, coaching phase with another thing, training with another thing, mentoring with another thing. And the real skill is learning how to jump between those gears and recognize what is needed at that moment quickly, and then deploy the right approach. So there's a few really useful it's a very important role the mentor plays and the mentee as a collaboration. The last thing I would say from a mentee, if you aren't feeling it, like, call it early. Okay, because it's not that just because you've been assigned a mentor or you think that mentor might be helpful for you, if that mentor is not proving helpful for you, or you're not gelling, or even if you don't like the sound of their voice, or you don't like the way they're explaining something, quit. Like, just quit that person, but go and find someone else immediately. Okay, go and find someone else immediately. Just because someone's mentoring you doesn't mean that it's going to be there's not going to be good rapport. It's going to be good relationship. It's not. So don't be afraid to give up a mentor. Don't give up the skill, but give up a mentor if it's not working for you.
Wow, we covered a lot of ground in this episode talking about mentoring and what it takes to be a great mentee and a great mentor. As we think about the stages of development in a person, the mentoring phase is only 20%, but we can maybe agree that it's one of the most labor intensive, both from a time commitment and energy commitment point of view, from two people, both the mentee and the mentor, because this is such a collaborative space. And if we think about the stages of learning, the 4 stages of learning, when we've gone past that training phase where the person's unconsciously incompetent and now they're consciously incompetent, which is a very hard quarter to be in, this is where they really need that support from a really good mentor or mentors. And Rob brought up this idea of scaffolding, which was brought up by Adam Grant in one of his books, and thinking about building this support network around the mentee with people who are genuinely engaged, interested, and involved in wanting to see that person succeed, but also a subject matter expert in the area that you're trying to develop this person in. And I think one of the points Rob brought up that for me was really important was, as a mentor, to also know your limits so that you're not trying to be the support person for all things. You don't need to be the unicorn. But it also frees up you as a direct manager of a person to someone on your team. You don't need to be the mentor in a certain training area or skills area. Look for other people who could better support your team member. And as a mentee, thinking about going in with a growth mindset and being open to just learning new things. Every situation is just something to learn from. Even if you think you messed up, something I would tell my team members is, well, that was interesting. What do you think happened there? Or what can we learn from it? And taking the opportunities to just sit back and reflect, and having enough of that confidence, I think, and relationship with your mentor to have a dialogue and talk about how you're feeling, how you think it went, what you think you did well. Don't forget about all the good things. And also just what you could do differently for next time. And if you don't have that person where you feel like you can talk that comfortably or openly, it's okay to say, hey, this isn't really working, and try to find somebody else that can maybe fill in that area. But don't give up. I know this is such a hard space when you're learning something new, especially for those of us in the veterinary space where we want to be able to be competent at all things all the time, but that's just not realistic, and it's okay. So choose where you want to be and find the people to help support you in your journey. Thanks for listening. Until next time.